Hello, my precious muses. Doing something a little different today with the help of my wonderful assistant, Shay, pronouns they, them. We are going to be reacting to a recent popular Ali Abdaal video through the lens of neurodivergence, chronic illness, and disability. Really excited for this, and I hope you all enjoy Shay as much as I do. Without any further ado, let's get to reacting.
Alrighty, so I recently got a question from one of my subscribers who feels like they are trying to do too many things. This is a guy called Zach.
Hey, what's going on, Ali?
He is trying to grow his photography business. He's trying to grow his YouTube channel. He feels like he's a bit overwhelmed. He's not really sure where it's all going. He feels like he's struggling to build systems around this sort of stuff. And so in this video, I want to share some honest advice for someone who feels like they're trying to do too many things.
The thing that I find interesting, and maybe Ollie will talk about this in the next section of the video, but the concept of what is too much is something that I find really important, especially in the neurodivergent, chronically ill, disabled space, because a lot of people come to me for help with their productivity and their executive function and better caring for themselves in order to live the life that they want, to spend their precious time and energy the way they want, the way they want and need to. And a lot of the times they're coming to me with what to me obviously looks like too much on their plate. But because they are neurodivergent or disabled in some way, shape, or form, there's this underlying assumption that it's not too much. And the bar at which something becomes too much for a neurodivergent or disabled person is much lower than someone who is neurotypical or able-bodied. And so one of the things that I see a lot with clients who join my program, the Action Navigator, is they quickly learn that they've been expecting way too much of themselves for way too long, and they're actually probably in burnout already. So usually they find me, they know they're in burnout and they want help, or they know they want help, but they have no idea they're in burnout. And once they start working with me, they figure that out.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why we wanted to react to this video in particular, because it was likely going to be a more neurotypical, able-bodied lens on what is too much.
The other thing that I like about the what is too much question, people are not average. So it's always that problem of, like, we like to group people into spaces, but it's also like and this includes neurotypical people, where it's just like, I only have so many spoons or pennies or gas like in the tanks, like, kind of thing. My amount is very different from your amount, just like it's very different from Ali Abdaal's, for instance.
When we think of all the things that are on Zach's plate, the other kind of assumption that isn't spoken out loud is deadlines for certain types of progress with each of those things. So becoming a portrait photographer and building a YouTube channel, your expectations for speed of progress that contributes to whether or not something is too much. So I myself, I have a YouTube channel. Hi, that's where we are right now. And I have a business. And I also have a couple of hobbies, and I have to manage all of my medical stuff. So my plate has the same, if not more, numbers of items on it than Zach does. I simply can't move as fast. I can't move the needle as fast in each of those areas simultaneously as someone who is neurotypical and or able-bodied.
But then also identifying, why do you need to go fast?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know that that's largely cultural, kind of thing, but that's the easy answer. Because any one of us can stop and look and be like, why am I actually rushing?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like it's more of a struggle. That question is more of a struggle for people who are neurodivergent and disabled at mental health issues. And it's because more often than not, because it takes so much longer, we feel like any moment that we're not doing something, we're falling behind.
Yeah. Something you said made me think about what is on your plate, like if you actually ask yourself, is this what I want on my plate? You may, if you're someone who identifies with the term of masking, so masking your neurodivergence, masking your chronic illness, you may discover that some of the things on your plate are part of your mask. And then you have the opportunity to ask, do I want to continue perpetuating this part of my mask, or am I willing to let it go? Let's do predictions for what he's going to talk about next.
Ooh.
So the next chapter is GPS, goals, plans, and systems. So it sounds like what Ollie is going to be focusing on is the actual organization of everything that's on Zach's plate. That will probably include maybe some pruning or distilling down of what the actual goals and purposes are, which I would agree with. But I'm curious to see how he's going to handle the too much part to really address that for Zach.
I think he's going to do it just from the standpoint of what you mentioned, of just pruning the list. And this is also part of why I really believe in Action Navigator and the work that you do, is that I feel like if he goes for the structured kind of like, make a SMART goal, figure out your values, like, you know, what goes down that route, it's going to be missing that underlying cause for that overwhelm and that feeling of having difficulty meeting deadlines. Like, you can have the best system in the world for a deadline and still miss it if you're not dealing with the underlying issue. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
because if like Zach were in the Action Navigator and he were either neurodivergent and or chronically ill, I would next ask him to clarify why these things are on his plate, like you and I were talking before, so we can get to that underlying reason for the overwhelm. Because oftentimes what happens is people cannot see the forest for the trees in their own experience and are unable, especially if they have executive dysfunction problems, unable to see possibilities for maybe a simpler way to actually achieve their goals instead of the way they're assuming they need to accomplish their goals. An example of, and this might be something Ollie ends up addressing, is like, why is Zach building a YouTube channel? What kind of monetization is he going for? Because depending on how he wants to make money from a YouTube channel will determine how he approaches achieving that goal. Let's go back to the video and see what Ollie has to say for Zach.
put my glasses back.
But I don't think that struggle is actually what Zach thinks it is. I don't think it's about the systems. I think
I'm laughing because I agree.
Absolutely, but that wasn't where I thought he was going to go with it. So
I know. I'm excited and hopeful because so many like productivity content that is more mainstream and gets as many views as like Ali Abdaal gets, or Tiago Forte, for example, tends to really only be applicable to people who are more neurotypical or able-bodied. And I'm really hoping that he gets into some of the nuance. And if he doesn't, that's what we're here for.
And I suspect, based on Zach's question, that he's either not clear on his goal, or if he is, he's not really clear on his plan or his strategy. So, for example, let's do
something that I really appreciate here is Ollie's being transparent that he doesn't have enough information to give really helpful advice for Zach. What happens a lot, both in wonderful comments that we get here on YouTube, or when clients submit questions inside my program for our group coaching calls on Zoom, is I get a really vague question. And when it's inside my program, once I'm talking to that person on Zoom, I can get all the details I need to actually give them helpful advice. But when it's someone on YouTube, I usually don't get enough information in order to help. And it's the specifics about not only someone's general situation, but the specifics of their relationship to the current problem. And so, for example, something that a lot of people in this Muse community experience is trouble brushing their teeth. I could give generalized advice on how to help someone brush their teeth, but it's much more powerful when I understand if someone isn't brushing their teeth because they literally can't get themselves into the bathroom, versus they're in the bathroom, they've washed their face, and they've forgotten to brush their teeth, and they've already gone to bed. Like, those are two very different problems, and therefore require very different solutions. Why are you laughing?
Because I was saying exactly what you were saying right at the end there. I was like, and I stopped myself. So like, we are in sync in this moment. I Sorry, everybody. I am a chaos gremlin.
It's like the goal is I want to add an extra 8K a month in profit or in revenue.
Would you like this to go 25% faster, like me?
Yes, please.
Woo!
Now, ideally, Zach should be able to come up with at least 5 options. If Zach cannot come up with 5 options, it means he has a knowledge problem.
Overwhelmed just listening to this. That's another thing. Like he's talking about like come up with all the different potential, like 3 to 5 chess moves, and I'm like, I get it. That's kind of like I'll equate that to like the tentpole writing for if you're writing about a story, but at the same time, I'm just like coming up with 5 different avenues to get to a final destination, which he's very brief on distilling what that is. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of assumptions made in that first part.
Yeah, I feel like Ollie's falling down a rabbit hole that is not actually relevant to Zach's original question, which was, I'm overwhelmed. How do I move forward and continue moving the needle towards my goals?
And Ali Abdaal is literally adding more to the plate.
Yeah, because for all we know, because we didn't get enough context from Zach, these might be things that Zach has already considered. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that like in order to actually get meaningful help from a productivity expert or an ADHD coach or your doctor, you need to provide context that is directly related to the question you're asking. And just because Zach self-diagnosed as systems and planning being the issue that's contributing to his overwhelm does not mean that's correct. So while Ollie originally was like, I don't have enough information to help you, buddy, if I were making this video for Zach, I would have stayed on that topic and gone into great detail about what context I actually need in order to help address the actual problem, which is too much overwhelm. And then the other thing I was thinking in this section, another from a neurodivergent lens, breaking a project like growing your business down into 3 to 5 steps is a good starting point. But if you're someone who so many of my clients struggle with, you need to get so granular with the steps to move forward. Like that person who can't get themselves to the bathroom to brush their teeth, and that's their problem, we address it in one of 2 ways. We figure out how to get them to the bathroom, or we bring the toothbrush to them.
Yep.
Right? And that's the kind of granularity. Like, do you have a bowl of disposable, like pre-toothpasted toothbrushes by your sofa, and all you have to do is spit out afterwards? Or do we figure
and you have
out
a cup, and you have like a cup right next to it, so that way you don't even have to get up.
Yeah. Or do we do a fun thing that makes you want to go to the bathroom? Getting like super granular is really helpful when breaking down steps, because that's part of executive function, is to be able to break something down into its smaller pieces. And if you have executive dysfunction, you're going to struggle with that. And even if you, in theory, know to break it down, doesn't mean your brain can. And that's where having someone like me or another coach that you work with who can help you do that breaking down can be really helpful.
Yeah. And that's the magic. It's the 2 different things working together.
If y'all are enjoying this format, let us know in the comments down below, and we will do this more.
And you know what? Let's go after winnings, because, I'm a young guy, I'm a good looking guy, I can be a wedding photographer or whatever. Cool. Now I just need 5 clients a month.
He was doing so good. That was so broy.
Yeah, I mean, it's all broy too, because like with all of the business, like check out all the different business books and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there being like, my dude, just listen to like one podcast and you're kind of set.
I just find it really interesting how he was like, I don't have enough information to actually address your question. So let me tell you everything I know. All that does is add to Zach's overwhelm.
Yeah. The thing that frustrates me about videos like this is the easy answer is, well, if it's not working for you, this is just an example. You're just supposed to take it and run with it, when it's really just like, because this example is not met with a proper amount of context to answer the question. It's almost like when someone's training you to do something, like when you're making food and then they do a shortcut and you don't know it's a shortcut kind of thing. How, like, sewing patterns, they just assume you know certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just like, that's what it feels like here, where it's like, you, the individual, if you try to, because I've done it before, where I'll take even like your YouTube videos and others, where I'll try to emulate the example. And then I met with really frustrating, because I'll get stuck on those points of assumption because he doesn't have all the information.
Yeah. He's being very transparent that he doesn't have all the information. So he's making his best guess, and probably an appropriate best guess based on the people who interact with his videos and who pay for his programs. He's not doing anything.
No.
No. And this is a lovely video. We haven't even finished yet. I'm enjoying it.
No, I am too. Like, I recognize I have like a severe tone, and it's like, I don't mean for it to sound like I'm like, how dare
You're good.
you? Like,
You're good. But the reason why we're doing this is because there isn't enough of an internet presence for people who are looking at these things through a neurodivergent and chronically ill and disabled lens. And that's all we're doing. It occurs to me that another factor that can contribute to getting really confused when you get like a professional coaching response from someone you look up to and you trust. If you are a bottom-up thinker versus a top-down thinker. So for example, most people who are autistic are bottom-up thinkers. We need to understand the whole before we can get into the weeds. Whereas those who are top-down are comfortable and can understand by giving things in pieces, whereas that is deeply stressful.
Yeah.
When you're a bottom-up thinker like myself.
When I was in college, I took a music technology class where we like learned about the anatomy of the microphone and how the like electronic part worked, and it was super cool. I was getting C's the entire semester because he was going one piece at a time, but it's like we were doing a puzzle, but nobody had the box. And then at the very end, he finally shows the box, and suddenly everything clicked, and I got a freaking A on the final. But my midterm was like a C. Everything was like a C the whole semester, but it's because I needed to see all of it before I could get down there and do. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why my program, The Action Navigator, is a pre-recorded course that you have access to the whole thing when you join. So if that's the kind of brain you have, you can binge watch the whole thing, then go back and get more detailed on each individual piece, because you'll have the context in order to understand it better.
It's either a math problem or it is a drama problem.
Yeah, the word drama is...
There's negative connotation to that.
Yeah, especially if you're not a man, that's going to be a problematic word to use. I like the concept of distinguishing those two areas of business.
We were talking about that earlier. There was like the systems issue versus the psychological overwhelm issue.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like calling it drama, especially because it's like math. Why couldn't you have just done math and then like psychology or arts or
Oh, it's so interesting. It's kind of like how in the workplace an assertive man is just a confident go-getter guy, whereas an assertive woman is a bitch, for example. And then heaven forbid you fall outside the binary and nobody knows what to do with you.
Oh yeah, that's it has a mild misogynistic. I hope, at least because Ali Abdaal is quoting someone, that for him it's incidental. It's not something. Yeah. But it's also just, again, it's that the general theme through our talks where it's just that like assumed. What are the things that are assumed and not challenged?
Yeah. So. And something to consider when you're engaging with content online is, am I the ideal viewer for this content? Am I the person that this content is made for? For example, I've gotten some really awful comments on my videos. That's just what happens on the internet. You get awful comments. But particularly on my like morning routine video and my self-diagnosis video. And I just it boggles my mind that these people are like, this is clearly not for me. I'm going to be mad about it. Just move on with your life and go find something that is for you. But when it's the neurodivergent disability space, we have to think critically about the media that we're taking in with the goal of helping ourselves, because we have to watch an Ali Abdaal video through the lens of our personal experience and realize that while these suggestions and help may be ideal for someone else, they might either not be ideal for us at all and we can ignore them, or we can pick out the aspects that could be helpful and modify them to meet our own specific needs.
But the danger is because there's not as much content that is geared towards the neurodivergent disabled folks, you run the risk of getting pushed further into burnout as you're constantly getting the same message reinforced into your brain that is not meant for you.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I talk about whenever I talk about laziness, for example. Like, laziness doesn't exist. Our culture teaches us that we're lazy. So this is one of the insidious ways where we're not overtly being told we're lazy. But if you're someone who is in a marginalized group where the world is not set up to cater to your every need, and particularly in our use case, neurodivergent, chronically ill, disabled, the subtext of watching content like this is there's something wrong with you, you're broken, you're lazy, you're not doing enough, you are overwhelmed because you're doing it wrong, as opposed to you're overwhelmed because you're disabled and this is harming you, for example.
Because it's hard to step outside of your comfort zone, you then retreat back and you think, let me try something new.
I'm glad he's addressing
Yeah. So this is 100% true. But like, if you're chronically ill, disabled, neurodivergent, you also have to take into account, is this direction harming me or making it harder for me because I'm not accommodating myself appropriately or taking into account my disabilities? It's not just your comfort zone. It's your ability and your capacity that you have to take into consideration when you're choosing goals and choosing how to go after those goals. Just because you can't achieve something the neurotypical ableist way doesn't mean it's impossible to achieve that goal. That is not an automatic correlation. Sometimes that is what that means. So maths and feels, we're going to call it feels.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. The disability stuff is actually more in the maths category. Neurodivergence, chronic illness, disability, that falls on the maths side because that is a concrete barrier to access issue that you have. And while one of your disabilities might be depression, for example, that does create and or dissipate feels in unfun ways, it doesn't mean that the drama, to use the less helpful word, is the problem. It's the supporting yourself that should be the focus.
And half the time it's the, well, you just do it comment, which we did a video on that. But I will say, I think even neurotypicals should be factoring in capacity. Was it capacity and ability? Yeah. If neurotypicals did that, overall burnout would be almost exclusively like the kind individuals.
Right. Because like I talked about in my recent compassionate productivity video, even able-bodied neurotypical people are experiencing burnout at unprecedented levels because the year 2024 is asking far too much of every person.
And think about, what's the first answer that comes to mind? Why am I not already there?
Oh boy.
That's unhelpful. That is very, I have thoughts and I know you do too.
No. If you don't have ability and capacity barriers, that seems like a pretty straightforward question to ask yourself. But if you're someone who does have capacity or ability barriers, that is a recipe for hating on yourself so hard and thinking you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you need to be fixed. And that, that's not what's happening. If you don't feel that way, it's not helpful.
No, it's not. It feels like he's skipping a step, going straight to limiting factors. The amount of times that I have personally asked myself that question because of videos like this, and it will be my my chronic illness. And then it either it's an and or situation where it will either do what you had mentioned, where makes me, it affects your self-worth and your motivation to even do the thing. It can also just, and this has happened to me before, where it just, you give up. You're just like, then I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Which really sucks. I do agree with him though when he was talking about when you're butting up against your comfort zone, like, because you've talked about that with the window video.
Yeah, this is where so far a rather benign video for people in this audience becomes something that could be harmful.
Yeah.
Because there's this lack of empathy and understanding. And I won't necessarily fault him for this because he is making his content for a more able-bodied, neurotypical masculine audience. Therefore, this question is more appropriate in this context. But for those of us who are looking for help because it doesn't really exist in this niche, it can be a very harmful question to ask at that stage in the process.
I'm looking forward to see if he says any caveats, because he's been doing tons of caveats leading up to this. So yeah. I really hope that he gives some caveats on the feels side of things, because if he does, then that actually turns this from a potentially harmful video to a really helpful video kind of thing. As long as you're willing to listen to the caveats.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's the kind of thing where if someone is looking for that help and then they get to this question and they already know what the answer is and it already affects their self-worth, they might stop watching and not get the caveats.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
I just want to highlight like that, like working backwards logic is something I do with clients a lot of the time, and it can be really helpful. But again, if you have executive dysfunction, you're going to struggle to do that yourself. But understanding when that kind of backward logic is appropriate and helpful is, I think, the piece we're missing here in reference to those who are chronically ill, disabled, neurodivergent.
But thinking on the level of system, when you haven't yet defined your goal and defined a plan to get there, is gonna just wind you in knots, and it's not.
Overall, I agree with that, except it doesn't feel like it's addressing the actual overwhelm problem.
Yeah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
He touched on it in the planning section of it, but again, it was more like he mentioned it in the caveats. So,
yeah. So like if Zach were my client, what we would spend our coaching time on is getting clear on those goals and then seeing how those goals living in Zach's head are creating the overwhelm.
Yep.
And then if necessary, editing those goals to address the overwhelm. Yep. That's how I would address Zach. I don't know why I'm doing finger things. I'm stimming. I'm going to grab my fidget toy.
You take them out for coffee or breakfast or something, you ask them for advice, you shadow them on a shoot, you see how they're doing things, you ask them to help you out.
That's a really important piece of advice. If you are trying to accomplish XYZ in your life, you go to someone who has accomplished your XYZ and you ask them for help.
Yep.
Other times it's finding the right coach for you online. But when we take advice from people who have not done what we're trying to accomplish, we always have to take that advice with a grain of salt. Like, yes, Ali has like amazing advice for someone growing a business or growing a YouTube channel. His circumstances are different. He's an able-bodied man and he was in med school when he started. So like he had the ability to not only go through med school, but also start a YouTube channel. That's
the
like
amount of energy. That's Beyonce levels of energy.
Yeah, that blows my mind, and I am very jealous because that sounds amazing.
Yeah. But
and I know it wasn't a cakewalk for him. That would be literally impossible for me or you or a lot of people in our community. So that added context of like, yeah, I want to grow a business, I want to grow a YouTube channel, but who are the people who have similar contexts and circumstances to me that I can look up to?
These two goals are two people's worth of work and effort. And that again goes back to the capacity and the ability where it's like, and also that like need for speed type of thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting there being like, sure, 10 goals is hard to accomplish any of it. It is incorrect to say that having a ton of goals and working on all of them means that you won't move at all.
Mm-hmm.
When really it's like, no, it'll happen. But when you're doing 10 people's worth of work for something that would take each would take 5 years, then it's going to take you 50 years to get there.
Yeah.
With all of them. You do make progress. It's just slow progress. And it sucks because so many times it feels like the neurotypical able-bodied community, or like just the regular world, is very, like, they view people. I get the feeling, I have felt this, where because I am disabled and my capacity is less, that is also where that laziness accusation comes from. Because it's like, where I'm sitting there being like, no, I'm making really good progress. But that's because my mile marker is shorter than yours. Like, and I have to go slower.
As you said that, it occurred to me that, like, Ali is addressing the overwhelm, but without speaking directly to it.
Yeah.
There's like this subtext of like, pick one, buddy.
Which is awesome. Like, that is also the easiest way to reduce overwhelm, is just cross things off the list.
Or like you were saying, like, prioritize which one you want to make more progress in faster, and let the other one be chill. And if someone were coming to me with these two things, because so many people who are neurodivergent, chronically ill, disabled, are struggling with finances to literally put food on the table and have housing, I would ask, like, which one of these feels more financially viable to you based on your ability and capacity? Luckily for those who work with me, I have a lot of experience with both YouTube and business. I'd be able to explain to them what are the actual tasks that go into creating revenue from either of these goals. But that's how we would decide which one that they would put their precious time and energy into, which one would be more viable based on their ability and capacity.
Loads and loads and loads of people in the world are trying to go full-time on YouTube. Not everyone is going to make it.
He's making the assumption that the revenue is coming from YouTube directly. So AdSense, ads, or sponsorships. But there is a third way, which is what I do, which is I market a service outside of YouTube. And that is much easier to become financially viable without huge reach with your YouTube platform. Just wanted to share that because that's important. And this is another one of those things. It's like, there's an underlying assumption under what he's saying. And if you don't know what you don't know, you'll take what he says at face value, then carry those assumptions without knowing what they are.
Exactly. It's like the sewing pattern.
This is hard. Very hard to go full-time on YouTube. I would not recommend it. Growing a biz is fairly easy.
No.
Yeah. Growing a business
is hard.
Yeah. Depending on what product or service you're selling and what market you're selling to.
Yeah.
It vastly changes how easy it is. So,
also,
like, for
they
example,
are both luck. They are both luck.
Yeah. So, for example, teaching people how to make money is usually a pretty easy way to, like, sell a service because people want to know how to make more money, right? And so, like, while it is very possible to grow businesses in any niche, it, depending again on your ability and your capacity and your access to helpful information based on your circumstances, will vastly affect how easy or not easy building a business is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I found frustrating because, like, I'm trying to build a business that is ethical and also profitable, and really difficult to do.
Late stage capitalism.
Growing a creative YouTube channel where you're earning money from either ad revenue and or sponsorships, that is automatically hard button. That's hard to do.
Yeah. And that is more reliant on luck than anything else. Whereas, but business there's still a luck factor because, luck is just a lot of its location and timing.
Yeah. Your privilege as an individual.
Exactly. So that makes sense, frankly, because Ali Abdaal has quite a lot of privilege. I feel like that's a fair thing to say. It would make sense that for him, making a business would be easy.
Yeah, and his audience has similar levels of privilege.
It is an unfortunate side effect of capitalism that those who have money find it easier to make money than those who do not have money.
I really appreciate how he used the word unfortunate because it's true.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one. Bye.
I really love how we did a pretty good job of like predicting what he was going to talk about. And I really do appreciate the amount of nuance that he was able to include in his video.
Yeah.
He goes above and beyond compared to some other big names in the productivity space. While YouTube is longer form video content, like that was maybe 20 minutes ish, he couldn't have addressed all of the nuance around this topic. And like, while we're looking at it through a neurodivergent, chronically ill, disabled lens, there are other lenses to look at this through. Like, we touched a little bit on the late capitalism aspect, and even he did. He was like, it's easier to make money when you have money. That's very true and very unfortunate. The point of making this React video was not to critique Ali in any way, shape, or form. It's instead to look at the information he's providing through a neurodivergent, chronically ill, disabled lens, so that if you are someone who has enjoyed his content, but you feel like it's not quite hitting the spot for you based on your circumstances, if what we talked about today is like, oh my God, that's me, now you know this is a safe space that you can come to get more nuanced information about the things you're struggling with. That's why we made this video.
Exactly. I was kind of worried that it was going to be us being like, oh God, like, this is awful. When really it was like, it was mostly just agreeing and then expanding upon kind of thing. There was far less like, I'm glad.
Yeah.
That was a good video.
The other thing that I feel like is really cool was this is the first time I would say my YouTube audience has gotten to see how my brain works in a coaching perspective, because one of the things that students in my Action Navigator program get access to is weekly Zoom coaching calls with me that are ongoing. It's a lifetime access program. So as long as I'm running this business and I'm running these calls, you have access to them. There's no expiration date on your access to them. So you can understand how I do my due diligence to personalize my feedback to every individual student's circumstances and problems. So if you're interested in the Action Navigator, there's a link in the description box below. It's like I said, a lifetime access course, community, and coaching. So it's the course itself, everything I know about how to spend your precious time and energy the way you want and need to as someone who is neurodivergent, chronically ill, or disabled, and the private community on Discord, which is a breath of fresh air because everybody really just gets it and understands, and it feels amazing. And then the ongoing weekly group coaching calls with me. If it sounds like something you're interested in doing, you'll end up scheduling what is called a discovery call.
You will be hanging out with me for 15 to 45 minutes.
The goal is to find out if I am the right person to help you with what you're struggling with, because we don't want to take money from people who we can't help. That makes no sense.
Waste your time in the process.
Yeah, we don't want to waste your time or your money. And I offer a sliding scale. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you all love Shay as much as I do.
Excellent.
Yeah, this is probably the part where the bloopers happen.
Yeah.
I said something to my spouse the other day that I'm like, I need this on a t-shirt. Your ADHD gives me